You hear people talking about personal growth, but what is it exactly? I mean, aren't we done growing when we get to be adult size? What's the difference between growing physically and growing personally? And why does it matter? Hi, I'm Coach Dave. I'm an independent OPTAVIA coach, OPTAVIA, and I've been helping people safely lose weight physically and mentally for over 10 years. Personal growth is the intentional expansion of our competence, confidence, and consciousness, and how those things shape the way we live our lives. In each area of our life, there is a limit to our capabilities. How we respond when we hit that limit will determine whether or not we're able to create success in our lives. And by success, I'm borrowing Napoleon Hill's definition, which was the ability to adapt to the changing circumstances of life in a spirit of harmony and poise. If we pull back and decide to function within the limits of our current capabilities, we will ultimately stagnate. However, if we choose to lean into the unknown at a rate we can tolerate and develop our capabilities beyond our current limits, we can increase our capacity for effectiveness and performance. Personal growth is essential because the world will never be less complex than it is at this moment. And the emerging process we call life will demand capabilities that we do not possess yet. It is only by intentionally developing and expanding our capabilities that we may come to face what life demands of us. However, if we fail to rise to meet this demand, we will be overwhelmed by the ever-increasing complexities that life brings us. There is no such thing as stasis in nature, and the same thing is true in our personal lives as well. Even if we think we are maintaining stasis in some way, we will ultimately be pulled under as life swells around us. American writer and futurist Alvin Toffler said, "The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn." So how do we do it? How do we take charge and direct our own growth? I like to think of personal growth the way that I think about literacy. Literacy in this context is not merely the ability to read and write, although that is a big part of it. Literacy is the mastery of language in a couple of different ways. First, mastery of language refers to our ability to learn new information and ideas from outside of ourselves, like, say parents and teachers, as well as from our own imagination, and then organize our minds and express our thoughts and ideas using language. Think of when you were a kid growing up. You started in elementary school and then you went on to high school and so on. When we look back at the end of each school year, it's clear, I hope, that we are smarter and more capable than we were at the beginning of the school year. Second, mastery of language refers to our ability to absorb, integrate, and expand our repertoire of specific terms and expressions associated with our areas of expertise. Think of a niche where you have a natural talent or you've invested time and attention developing your abilities. This kind of literacy is gained by targeted learning, by implementation and deliberate practice, and by ongoing assessment of our experience with an eye towards advancement. It is our literacy that underpins our beliefs, filters our perceptions, and governs our thoughts, decisions, and behaviors as we move through life. But here's the crux. Whether we realize it or not, at any given moment, we all live at or below the level of our literacy in all key areas of life, because that is as much as makes sense to us at that given moment. Beyond that threshold, we are functionally illiterate and life no longer makes sense. Confusion forces a choice. Retreat to the safety and comfort of the known and the familiar, or push into the chaos and the discomfort of the unknown. If we want to expand our life beyond our current capabilities or results in any area, we must take it upon ourselves to develop our literacy in whichever areas we lack fluency. Because, as Austrian philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein once said, "The limits of my language mean the limits of my world." Now, there are 7 key areas of life where we all have to have some amount of literacy in order to function. These include physical well-being, as well as vocational, financial, social, familial, mental, and spiritual well-being. And it's important to pay attention to this stuff because, as one of my mentors, Dr. Wayne Anderson, says, if you don't value a key area, someone else will take charge of it for you. Until you take command of your own literacy in each of these areas, others will impose their literacy onto you and expect you to live from their point of literacy. The good news is, any key area can be expanded and developed into an area of expertise. It goes like this. We start with baby steps, literally as babies, and develop literacy in the basic literal sense. We learn to walk and talk and read and write and hopefully get along with others. As we grow, we branch out and start to develop some literacy in the 7 key areas I just mentioned. Then into adulthood, we branch out even further and expand our literacy as we develop our areas of expertise. Think of a medical student who becomes an intern, who becomes a doctor, who becomes a surgeon, who becomes a specialty surgeon. Or think of an athlete whose journey might take them from the Little Leagues to the World Series. Or a chef whose pursuit might lead them from tugging on their parents' apron to earning a Michelin star. Or a musician whose path might lead them from learning scales and playing chopsticks all the way to the stage at Carnegie Hall. Eventually, if we proceed to the pinnacle, we may pioneer new language in our area of expertise that the next generation will adopt as part of their development. When I was an undergrad in college, one of my classes was called Introduction to Applied Mathematics. Now, how the math in that class applied to anything in the real world was beyond me. It was like something out of Good Will Hunting. But it was a required course for our major, so every one of us had to pass. I remember sitting in class on day one thinking, I'm pretty good at numbers. Then the professor launched. He just took off like a rocket. The class was only an hour long, but in the first 45 minutes, he covered everything I'd ever learned in high school algebra, trigonometry, and calculus. By the time the hour was up, he was in some other academic galaxy. I was in a panic, and I had to choose to lean in and learn and grow, otherwise no degree. That was a long semester. Our capacity for action is limited by our literacy around that action. But we're not stuck where we are on a given day. There is always opportunity for growth and expansion in any area of our lives. But first, growth needs to be a priority. We need to decide that it matters. We need a growth mindset to leverage or even see those opportunities. But those opportunities are always there. There is always failure to learn from. There is always feedback. There are always results that can be examined and learned from. If you're ever at a point in your life where you feel like you've maxed out in a certain area, instead of shying away and assuming that's as good as it's ever going to get, take a step back and look for the growth opportunity. Look for the gap in your capability, the learning edge, that uncomfortable place where it feels like you're in over your head. Ask yourself, what am I missing? What don't I know yet? How am I deficient? Or how am I lacking? And who or what can help illuminate that blind spot and fill in that gap? If you're brave enough to ask questions like that, answers will present themselves, I promise. In truth, we will continue to change whether we want to or not. Like leadership guru John Maxwell says, change is inevitable. Growth is optional. The only question is, will we take command of our growth as we strive toward a future we actually want? Or will we drift passively in the currents of life, just taking what it happens to offer? Certainly there are circumstances in our life that are beyond our control, but I would argue that even then, there are opportunities to rise up and learn the lessons that life presents us. An effective, meaningful life is one spent at the threshold between the orderly garden of the known and the wild, chaotic wilderness of the unknown, intentionally expanding the boundaries between who we are right now and who we could be tomorrow. However, chaos is always at the threshold, pushing back at that boundary. And if we become complacent or cease to cultivate our life literacy or pursue our personal growth, that chaos will creep back into the garden and, if left unchecked, reclaim it. I hope this is helpful, or at least eye-opening. If it is, please share it with someone you care about. And if working on your wellness goals with me as your coach is something you'd like to explore, go to my website, mycoachdave.net, and click Explore.